There were a bunch of bad video games promoted at this year's Game Awards, and this video will be dedicated to showcasing them. These are the several games that did not deserve to be nominated at the Game Awards. Starting off, we have the king of honorary mentions, a game that I think I'm really going to have to call out every single year for being complete trash, and that is, of course, No Man's Sky by Sean Murray, Hello Games' masterpiece from 2016. I can't believe it's been 6 years, and there are still a dedicated group of people trying to pretend this game will ever be good. That's the narrative that we've been suffering under over the past couple of years, is that this myth that Sean Murray somehow patched the game into a playable state, but it's still a disaster. It's still boring as sin. Anyone who's actually tried it, myself included, will tell you that. The people who damage control this game are simply suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. It really is very, very bad. It's one of those, this is probably one of the most embarrassing things going on in gaming right now. And the fact that this game was nominated in the Game Awards 2022, it's embarrassing. It really is. There are so many better games out there. It's not even worth mentioning this one. This game's only historical significance should be a mark of the decline of PlayStation exclusives. This game really kickstarted the whole anti-PlayStation thing. This thing should have been reviled by the community. This should be one of those games that everyone hates, and yet somehow, some way, no one seems to notice or care about its numerous problems and issues. Another honorary mention on this list is, of course, Genshin Impact, a game that allegedly won the Player's Choice Awards. Not necessarily because the game was particularly popular among fans or because it has a dedicated cult following. The game won, and Jeff Keighley even admitted this on air, because they adjusted the total of votes that came in. The agenda, the story is that Sonic Frontiers, the fan base for Sonic released a bunch of bots to vote for Sonic Frontiers as the Player's Choice Awards. But the thing is, Genshin Impact was straight up bribing its audience with free in-game currency to go out and vote for Genshin Impact. If Genshin Impact won, they would grant every player 1,000 free Primo crystals or whatever. It was an evil versus evil situation. There was no winning here. I'm sure there was I'm sure there were bad votes. I'm sure there were bots. I'm sure Sonic fans did try to rig the vote. But on the other hand, is Genshin Impact the most popular game of 2022? I don't think so. I don't see anyone talking about or praising this game. I still really know nothing about it. I don't really talk about it at all. I don't really bring it up at all. The only time this game is even mentioned is whenever it gets nominated for a Game Award, and then it's quickly forgotten until the next year. Right? It reminds me of Fate Order or that Sony mobile game where all anyone seems to talk about when it comes to this release is how much money it's making, allegedly. And I'm not entirely sure I really believe that. If this game really had an audience, if this game really had people who were, obsessed with it, you would see that in some way among traditional gaming circles. You would see some kind of enthusiasm, some kind of respect for it, some kind of attention. I think one of the big reasons Pokemon Go was so big is that it actually did have a player base. In Genshin Impact's case, I think this is astroturfed. I think it's fake. I don't think this game is actually legitimately popular. As a result of this is probably one of the biggest shill picks of the show. Jeff had to fudge the numbers to give it a single award, and I don't think that's respectable. I don't think there's anything about this game that's worth talking about. There's really nothing worth addressing. It's just a piece of shit Chinese mobile game gacha trash that no one should be talking about. This game looks to be complete garbage. If any one game did not need to be nominated for Game of the Year, it was Horizon Forbidden West. If any game was there that to give Sony like some more dick suckings, it was Horizon Forbidden West. We all knew that like Elden Ring would be nominated. We all knew that God of War Ragnarok would be nominated, but Horizon Forbidden West? Really? A game and came and went and was overshadowed by Elden Ring in every possible way? I don't know a single person, other than like the most hardcore Sony fanboy shills in existence, that actually cares about this IP. It's one of like the biggest failures, I think, of modern PlayStation, in that this release just came, it was announced, nobody cared, it released, nobody cared, and now it's Game Award season, and nobody cares that it was even nominated. Nobody was promoting this or defending it or really giving this game any praise or attention at all. It feels like a massive step down from everything that's come before. You know, like this game came out in like March or April, right? Like already we had like better games like Pokemon Legends Arceus, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, even like Elden Ring, I would say is objectively better than this. Like Aloy's game was very, very highly shilled among the gaming journalism industry when it first came out. There were a lot of people saying it was better than Breath of the Wild. Like there was a lot of like there was a really big push to make this the new big thing, and it's completely fallen on its face. There is no enthusiasm for this IP, there is no hype for it, and absolutely no one believes it should have won Game of the Year. It's a walking simulator where you play as a cat. What a completely novel, original idea that's never been done before. The only positive thing anyone has to say about Stray is that you get to play as a cat, and that's really all reviewers really mentioned when talking about this one. You play as a cat, and that kind of sells itself, but the game just isn't interesting. Like compared to other games where you get to play as Okami, like play as animals, stuff like Okami, stuff like Deadly Creatures, like Stray really strikes me as something that's very, very unoriginal, very basic, very uninspired, something that really only sells itself based on its simple concept of being a cat in a dystopian hellscape. Like it's just not all that interesting. Like I was interested in checking this game out before the reviews came in, and like the reality of what this game was kind of came to light. Its length for one thing, its walking simulator nature for another. Like it's just not all that interesting of an experience, and it's really not something that anyone should remember or care about. Horizon Forbidden West was a sequel to a game that nobody cared about to begin with, but I think God of War 2018 really was the last gasp of relevancy from PlayStation exclusive titles. It really did feel like when 2018 came out that it was still like 2009, and Uncharted 2 was like really seriously looked at as being like a major innovator when it came to like third-person action games and storytelling in video games. Now, that was never actually true, but the gaming industry managed to convince people that it was. And God of War 2018 did a really good job, I think, of tricking its audience into thinking it was deep, it was profound, it was an evolution of the gameplay found in the original games, and like it was a natural like progression of Kratos' story. It was something new, it was something different. Like this new Kratos was like, you know, somewhat remorseful for what he had to do in the past. It felt like to fans that maybe they would actually do something interesting and mature with the franchise, moving away from its roots, like in a compelling new direction. That wasn't actually the case, as, you know, hardcore fans and like, you know, observers like me kind of pointed out, but the industry managed to convince people that it was true. But the thing is, it was never going to work for a sequel. The problems that were prevalent in 2018 were doubled down on in Ragnarok, from like weird Disney like squirrels and trees to just ridiculous continuity problems, to just everyone sounding like a Marvel villain, to just like weird characterizations for all these gods, like the way they talk, the way that the story plays out. Like there's just nothing here that feels like God of War. It feels less like a natural continuation of the story and more like a stale rehash of of the original God of War 2018, a game that really did not need to exist, right? I think the creators even acknowledge this, is that this is going to be the last game in the God of War series. I don't think they're going to follow up with a third one, because I think people are burned out on the IP at this point. I don't see a third one being successful at the rate they're going. Nobody seems to want to admit that the game has been a disappointment. Again, this game was nominated for several Game of the Year awards, and it did win several of them, particularly the ones that focused on the narrative driven stuff. The voice actor award. It did win a lot of awards, a lot of consolation prizes for not actually winning Game of the Year. But when all is said and done, next year nobody's going to remember God of War Ragnarok. I would argue nobody remembered it even when it came out. It came and went like the wind. This is not a game that anyone is going to look fondly on. If any game convinced me of the problems with the video game industry, it was Elden Ring. All hype, no substance. I can't think of anything that was hyped up as much as Elden Ring and kind of just fell by the wayside within a couple of months, right? This is a really good example of a game that was sold to an audience that was not aware of From Software's history or their past entries, because I really do think that FromSoft managed to trick its audience into thinking that this was the new Skyrim. This was going to be the big new open world RPG that you would play for years, for decades. And that wasn't the case. Hardcore fans breezed through it in about a month, while casual players dropped it within a couple of hours. The game essentially sold itself based on the promise of being something new, exciting, and fresh. The Monster Hunter world of the year, but at the same time, it really took away everything that made the original Dark Souls interesting or fun. I do think the cracks are starting to show when it comes From Software, and there are endless rehashes of the same ideas over and over and over again. The simple fact that Elden Ring takes place in open world doesn't change the fact that the combat is slow and stilted, that the difficulty is unbalanced, that the lore isn't interesting, that the game isn't fun, that there are better action RPGs out there. The reality is that I have gotten bored to tears of the Souls games. I've gotten bored of From Software in general, and even seeing Armored Core 6, and seeing how they're reassuring their audience that it's going to take elements from Souls games. I don't find that reassuring at all. I do think the games are getting stale and tired. I do think Elden Ring is a one-off success that'll peter away as the sequels come out. I do think From Software is on the decline. Sekiro was terrible. Dark Souls 3 was terrible. Nobody really wants to admit this, but FromSoft only became relevant because everyone else was doing a very specific thing in 2011 with their narrative, casualized hallway simulators, and they did something different. At the time, I appreciated them for doing something different, but at the same time, no, it's gone on too long. It's over. This series is played out. It's boring. It's tired. It did not deserve to win Game of the Year. I didn't even play it. That's kind of my feelings towards Elden Ring and games like it. These games are beloved by critics because it allows them to give the illusion that they are hardcore fans of video games.